Chris Roebuck. He's a visiting professor of transformational leadership at Cass Business School. Great to have you on the show. My colleague Sarah just said that the biggest decisions with regards to the coronavirus had been made. But politically, where does this leave the country when number one is in intensive care?
I think you need to understand that exactly as your correspondent has said, the biggest decisions have been made. There is a plan in place, and don't forget that this is not just a political decision, this is also a medical decision. So there are a full range of the top medical experts who are giving the critical medical advice to the politicians. And much of the decision making is not based on just the political elements of it, but critically, mostly the medical elements of it. So in that sense, it's the pushing forward of this medical stroke political plan, which is agreed. The fact that Boris Johnson has a deputy, and also let's not forget that in terms of the sort of ethos of what is happening in Britain at the time, that everybody is now starting to pull together and recognizing the threats, that whilst Boris Johnson is the Prime Minister, of course, the Queen is the head of state. And the broadcast by the Queen at the weekend about returning to the principles that the country has used in generation and generation before, of everybody pulling together, everybody doing their duty, is something that will consolidate that spirit in the nation just as much as Boris Johnson does.
And can I ask you about the optics of the leadership of the coronavirus, having, of course, the Prime Minister now in the situation he's in, and what this says about the optics of the management of the coronavirus by the UK government?
I think in terms of political leaders, and if we look around the world at the responses we've seen, leadership is quite easy when you have a steady transition from one state to another. But when something like this happens, that is, one, so fast and so impactful, what it means is that all the planning processes that have been put in place are effectively thrown up in the air. And it's a test of the rapidity of response to basically stabilize the situation and then move forward. And it is the ultimate test of, one, leadership, but also two, organization. And I think it's fair to say that the opposition in this country are asking valid questions about what was the initial policy of the government when they were aware of what was happening, what were their first steps, and were those the appropriate steps. But those questions, to some degree, are put to one side at the present moment, whilst the opposition and the government work together to take the country through the crisis.
Okay. Chris Roebuck, really appreciate your time and your comments. And, of course, fingers crossed for Boris Johnson from all of us here at TRT World.